Let's continue with the discussion.
Sure,
To find out, we know and we've been reading about, retrenchments even before COVID-19
sure.
showed up and started chasing us around. Um,
Yeah.
and we've been hearing that companies are retrenching, and there's
Mm,
been a lot of research done into work from home models, right? And it seems as if
sure.
productivity is increasing. I don't know if that's
Mm,
because people are not taking lunch breaks. I was speaking to one of my colleagues recently, and they were saying that they literally don't eat sometimes because they're afraid that their boss might think that they are sleeping, during lunch.
yeah.
So people
Yeah.
talk to them about how life is working from home. People are like, "What life? I'm literally working 24/7." So
Yeah.
with that being said, if the working from home model is actually doing very well, what then does it mean for these listed companies that have these big properties in Sandton, Waterfall, in CBD? What does it mean for them? That office space that people used to occupy and now will not be occupying, possibly in the short term,
Yeah.
and the long term. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So for me, if you look at how businesses function in in the office spaces, what this experience of working from home, I think is gonna affect, or I think it's gonna cause changes in the smaller business more than rather than larger businesses, right? So
Okay.
in large businesses, when you get a lease, right, you've got an office in Santon, you want to get a long-term lease because you're going to get some discounts, right? So if you're a
Yeah.
landlord and I tell you, look, Arabo, give me a 10-year lease and this is the rate, you're going to say, cool, because you've locked me in for 10 years. So now smaller businesses, don't have that luxury,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because our revenue forecast, we're not sure whether we're still going to be making the amount of money that we're making now in 10 years time. So we
Yeah.
always go for shorter, term leases, right? 3 years, 2 years, whereby a big listed, corporate will go for 10 years, because of the, benefits or financial benefits that we'll get from the
Mm-hmm.
lease, right? And the fact that large businesses have a lot of people actually in one building, over 600,000. I think just managing that type of workflow is better when you're in an office or at home, right? So in terms of office space, I don't think would when COVID-19 ends, the following year we'll see a huge drop in office demand. I don't think that is the case. In the long term, maybe 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 10 years, I think it is going to happen. However, if you look at how the office, space, could be affected by, let's say, there was a drop. When you have office space, it doesn't mean that once that demand for that office goes down, then you lose your property or you lose, rental income from it. You can always convert that space to, let's say, storage or, or residential as well. You can put in, some apartments in those office spaces. So companies that actually own office space, I don't think they're in much risk as people, are saying right now. They have a lot of options.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't have, thought of it like that, right? And that's the
Yeah.
benefit of speaking to someone like you who has insight on this. So
Sure.
what are some of the things that these listed property companies are doing to sort of pivot as well and um, adjust to the way of of the future, the way in which things
Mm.
might eventually change in terms of working space and Karabo waking up every day, in the cold of May and going to sit down at a desk.
Yeah. So, oh, you mean, and you mean in the office spaces, right?
Yeah, what are some of the ways in which these companies are pivoting and changing their mindset around that space that they have?
Yeah, I think the first thing that property companies would be looking at is controlling like the GLA, right? That is the size, right, that they actually rent out, to businesses, because of this rise in the need to be working from home. It's quite obvious that the demand for space will actually go down. I know in the previous question I said large corporations won't be affected much, but if it does happen, property companies will be looking at actually reducing the sizes of those office blocks, and making sure that that space actually goes to some other, sectors instead of just office, right? So you'll see a lot of developments in, let's say, logistic spaces, warehouses, where if I mean, think about it. So if a lot of people, will be starting to working from home, a lot of even the way people actually shop and do business will change outside office spaces, right? Shopping malls, buying online, etc., etc. I know a gentleman who's still in London, and he was telling me that, since 2017, 2016, he's never gone out to shopping malls to actually buy food, groceries, right? He did everything online. So they'll deliver his groceries like we would order McDonald's in, right? So the thinking for property companies, look, if we're going to have sort of like a shift in the way we do business in the property spaces, a lot of it will be more of a digital, transformation type of game rather than just physical one. However, if you look at the property sector as a whole, most of the property companies, most of our ownership is actually into retail, right? Those are shopping centers. I think I checked some numbers, and I think it was close to 60% where, that is the size of the retail that property companies actually own. And the office space, that you're actually asking me about was something like 15%. So holistically, from a property perspective, office space doesn't, have a lot of size or GLA compared to retail and residential as well. So the office question is not really, a train smash. These property companies actually have options. I mean, we're looking at some of the discussions actually going on is that companies who have rooftops, like these huge buildings, they will be turning, those rooftops actually to do gardening, to do, agricultural, stuff. I mean, we'll be growing, green peppers, tomatoes on rooftops, put that, that development on rooftops. So, I mean, that sounds futuristic, but that's how quickly, things are moving. And I believe that, property companies have a lot of options in that regard.
Yeah. And I mean, I've heard and I've read a few articles around that, right? Where even within office spaces, they are actually starting to grow plants, and it actually has an environmental impact as well, because now we don't have to worry about some of the pesticides that we have to spray. We don't have to worry about insects because it's indoors. They literally just
sure.
specific chemicals to sort of help the plants grow, and we don't have to also worry about some of the fertilizers that we put into the soil and might cause some issues with the soil. So
yes.
It's actually great to know that we can actually use these spaces and pivot them into something different. But
yes.
Sort of informally asking you this, I know, I mean, I'm bombarding you with questions here, but maybe if you can just shoot from the hip. So are you telling me that post-COVID, will we still be finding, the stores that we love? Because I hear you talking about how, some of these companies are struggling. If I go to, Mall of Africa, am I going to find that business that, I love to go to? Will it still have, a physical presence when you look at how things have played out in the past 55 days of lockdown, I think we've had?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, the reality is that a lot of companies or a lot of businesses, are struggling right now. I mean, companies are knocking, in banks, asking for these reliefs, these payment holidays. So if you look at how things are going, right, with COVID-19, I read some research, I think last week Friday, and they were saying that in South Africa, this COVID-19 is actually going to peak at around August and September, right? And another research, I think it's from Wits University, they were saying that by the end of 2020, 3 million South Africans would have, contracted this virus, and I think there will be around 40,000 deaths. So from that perspective, I mean, if you look at those numbers, I mean, they just so shocking, and whether you like it or not, it is gonna affect the economy. It is gonna affect how shops start looking at their businesses, how they can make it better. And in most cases, people actually work there. I mean, employees are the ones that are actually affected the most. If you look at a company that is ready to cut costs, what is the first thing that they're gonna look at, right? Most companies actually look at headcounts. So look, we want to keep the lights on, and if we have to cut some, costs, the first, the first, factors that they look at is actually resources. So they're gonna cut, people off. They're gonna, cut jobs, etc., etc. However, in terms of closing down, it depends on, stuff like the balance sheet of the business, as a whole, how they've performed for the previous year. Because if they're hoping to come back, post, COVID-19, it's gonna take us another 24 or 36 months, which is about 2 to 3 years. Some of the economists are saying that, to actually recover, and when we talk about a business recovering, we actually mean, making profit, right? Because that's the bottom line. And if these companies are going to stay afloat, I mean, there are going to be compromises, that there will be. But don't worry, if you go to Mall of Africa, there will, be a lot of shops still open. You won't see the, the occupancy rate of those malls actually going down. You might see some of, shops closing in, lower income, areas like townships. You'll see companies, property companies that have those properties in those areas actually closing down because, a lot of studies shows or research shows that a lot of, tenants in those shopping malls are actually bad tenants. They don't pay rent on time. They just problematic. So I think, for higher income malls or shopping centers like Mall of Africa, Fourways Mall, Sandton City, those are the guys who will stay afloat. They have strong companies begging them, strong balance sheets. But in the lower, LSM, you'll see a lot of those shopping centers. You'll see a lot of shops in those smaller shopping centers actually closing down.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.